Good to see you again. Been a while.
I know. I'm so sorry it's taken so long to actually do this.
No, it's fine. It's funny. I was thinking about that earlier. The digital world, it's supposed to make things easier, but like everybody that I've talked to about interviews, we pick a date and then inevitably something comes up and we push it off about a month or two. So no, this is standard. This is all good.
It's easier but harder.
Yeah. So the last time we talked was probably I was on your brother's show.
Oh yeah.
And I know it was the closeout that you guys had a bunch of indie authors on.
I've missed the show though, because I've missed like the weekly excuse to get together with people and just talk about like creative stuff. So I was really excited, even though like we put this off like dozens of times and most of the time it's my fault. I was like super excited. I'm like, oh, I haven't done this in forever. It'll be so nice to do this again. So thank you.
No, happy to do it. Happy to do it. So with that segue, I'm gonna, because I already know you, it's hard to be like, so tell us about yourself. But why don't we start there? But I know you said that you've been working on something new or just released something new, and I really want to hear about that. But let's start with just tell us about you for people
okay.
who don't know.
So for people who don't know, I'm a Killarney Traynor. I'm a writer. I've also done some film work, like directing, writing, and producing. Right now, I'm mostly writing, writing scripts, and I'm writing books. And I'm actually getting ready to release a new, very short book, which is new for me because it's a biblical fiction, which I've never done before. And I'm really excited about it. And it should be coming out in April. So, yeah.
All right. So now I'm going to scrap all of my questions that I sent to you because, all right. So biblical fiction, that's what section did you take that you're reviewing?
So I was, so it's actually, it's set in Jerusalem about the time that Jesus is going to, the Last Supper. And it's based on a woman who lost her child in the Purge of the Innocents, when Jesus was born. And she realizes that the guy that everyone says is a savior is the cause of her child's death. And so she has to deal with what this means.
Wow, some light reading there, huh?
Yeah, it's very light.
It's an ambitious topic, but it sounds really interesting. Don't get me wrong. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's there's a couple of trigger warnings in it, obviously, because it deals with death of children and stuff like that. But I actually got this idea because I was watching a short film a friend of mine did, and they had a brief scene from that part of the birth story. And I was watching one of the women and I thought, geez, what would happen if you met Jesus? I'd be really ticked.
Yeah.
I would not be happy about it.
No, I was just talking to a buddy of mine about just dealing with adult topics in writing. And it seems like you kind of are in a similar space as to me, where I did a few high school things, and now it's like I want to talk about something a little bit more legitimate, but it's very strange because when you go into topics like that, to rehash some conversation that I had with my friend, it's like Stephen King had put in his book on writing, don't be afraid to put pieces of yourself into your work or to write about big questions. When people read your work, they're not going to sit there and be like, oh, where did this come from? Or how does this person relate? And it's I don't know. I feel like maybe strangers reading my work, that's fine. But I feel like anybody in my family, just total hypothetical. Yeah. But if I write about a bad marriage, because that's a very compelling plot point, are they all going to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, are him and his wife, are they having...
No.
It's a weird, you want to talk about things that are adult and that are,
well, I wrote about
have
that
those trigger warnings, but it's how do you do that gracefully, especially when you've been writing stuff that was geared towards a younger audience? So
yeah, it's a good question. Also, I think the bigger problem, well, it's not a problem, the bigger challenge with writing about these more adult themes is how do you do it sensitively?
Yes.
And how do you do it in a way that doesn't isolate the people that you're talking about? Because I haven't personally lost a child, and I don't know anybody that, thank God, that's lost them in this way. So, so trying to find a way to talk about it in a way that's respectful and real, was a challenge for sure. But to your point about would people read this and think, oh my God, she's talking about, I wrote a book where a woman had, she ends up learning something not very nice about her father. And the whole book is about her dealing with this shattered image of her dad. And when I remember when I was publishing it, I was thinking like, this is not my dad at all.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
is anyone going to read this book and think, oh my God, that's Arnie's father? Like, and it's not. My dad's a good guy. He did not do that. So,
Yeah. No, that is the great struggle with growth, you know,
yeah.
and changing your style a little bit.
Yeah.
So just one other thing that you mentioned earlier, and then I'll look at these questions again that I had originally sent to you. You said you're doing a lot of scripts and screenplays right now?
Yeah, I've written quite a few short films actually, and I'm hoping to shoot at least 2 of them this year.
Nice.
They started off as kind of like challenges because I went through a real, actually this reflects on one of your questions. For the past couple of years, I've been in a real writer's block. So writing short things has been my way of kind of fighting the block. And writing short scripts for me is easier than writing short stories. I don't know why. It's easier to think short when it's a film than it is with a story. So so that was how I got myself out of writer's block, was I just was like, okay.
So just work on something else.
Yeah, exactly. Like just ignore it, pretend it's not happening.
Nice. I'm just gonna apologize this whole interview, but you and I know each other a little too well, and I know you a little too well to know what. So, for people who don't know, you wrote a book that was called Michael Lawrence: Season of Darkness. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that ended up being turned into a film, right?
Well, actually, it was the other way around. I'd written a script as a piece of fan fiction.
Okay.
And then my brother read it and was like, why don't we turn it into a film? So we unfanned it, like we made it our own thing. And then I turned the script into a book after we shot the film. Writing, actually, I was helping him direct the film, and I would write out the scenes as a book as a way to help me visualize before we actually got on set, like how I wanted to see it.
Nice.
So it ended up being half written by the time the film was shot. And then I just finished it and put it out as a book. So
cool.
yeah.
No, that's very cool. That's unique, and especially in the indie world, that's not something that you hear about as much, where it's like, oh yeah, you can see the movie version, or like if you're lucky, you have an audio book.
I've had people laugh at me and go like, oh really, there's a movie? I'm like, yeah, there really is.
Yeah, it is.
Like, you don't have to watch it, but it's good.
Well, where can I find it? Is the
I can actually send you a link. I'm not sure. It used to be on Amazon. It's now on our local channel, like in our town, so you can just like
nice.
Watch it at any time. Yeah, but I'm not quite sure what the link is called. I should know it, but I don't. So
okay, well, I can dump that into the YouTube video for
great,
a link as well. Yeah, so send it over to me. I'd like to see it too, because I remember it must have been Instagram, either that or I was creeping on your blog, because you know other indie authors, every now and again you check in, you're like, what are they doing? Should I be doing that? Like, and yeah, no, I saw a lot of the photography from it, but you guys were still like in the heat of working on things. So
yeah,
one other question that I'm going to ask you, and then I promise I'll get to the real questions. Have you been doing, so you also did something very unique with your writing, where you were writing with your sister for several of your books. How did that work? And like, are you guys still writing, or?
Well, since we did that, she got married and had 2 kids, so she's not
as available.
She's not really in the headspace that she used to be. But yeah, so how that came about was we used to play tennis badly with each other, and as we were like, you know, trying to catch the ball, we'd start talking about stories. We'd be like, well, wouldn't it be funny if you were snowed into like not funny, but scary if you were snowed into a haunted house? And then we would hash out the outline. I would write it and send it to her, and she would tell me it's too long and I'd have to cut things back. And so it was a great collaboration, actually, because in a sense she was like, I'm so used to writing that, and she was fine with letting me handle the bulk of the writing, which worked for me. And she was very good at saying, this is too emotional, this is not emotional enough. Like, she was just a great partner to work with. And we did 3 books together. They're all the Encounter series, and they're all kind of the same. We call them like, if like they're touch of Agatha Christie and a little bit of like old movies. So if you read them, you're like, hey, that could be I don't even know, Ray Milland in this role. Like, yeah, we probably thought about him when we were writing it.
Yeah, I think I confess, I've only read one or two of your books, but I've read the first one from the Encounter series, and it was very good. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. Okay. I always have a soundtrack whenever I write a book. I don't know if you do that too. But for that, I use the Changeling from the 80s, which is this George C. Scott movie. And if you want to freak yourself out, listen to just the soundtrack. The soundtrack is
I know enough about films, but I don't know much about that one, so I'll listen to the soundtrack first, and then
it's a good one. It's like a smart haunted house movie. It's really good.
Okay.
So yeah, still scary.
All right, I'll pull up the questions now and see.
Okay.
Right, so what have we touched on? Tell us a little about yourself. That got out of hand. No,
it did.
So, all right, when did you start writing? And I know you've done a lot of books at this point. If you want to just give a brief overview, maybe just like the theme of each one.
Oh, sure. So I started writing way back, like when I was 8. I like to say my first published book was one that I hand wrote and my brother illustrated, and we copied it and gave it to our family for Christmas. So
wow.
I've been doing this. Yeah, it was very old school. We bound it and everything. I don't think anyone liked it, but we enjoyed it.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I've been doing this a long time. And my first official book was Summer Shadows, which is about a woman that inherits her sister's 3 kids after her sister has a tragic accident. And they end up going to New Hampshire and settling in a house that's right next door to a haunted house. And they have to solve a mystery while learning to be a family. And I think in a lot of ways, that one actually kind of sets up a lot of, if you will, my tropes. I like books about families. I like books that have mysteries. If they can just have a little bit of spookiness, that's so much the better. And I really like books where it leaves you feeling like, oh yeah, I can solve this problem, or oh yeah, like, no matter how bad things get, there's a good out, like, reasonable out. So I try to write books that leave you feeling better after you've read them.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. So yeah. Did you want me to do the rest of the books, or?
I guess my only. So can you list, because I know there was 3 in the Encounter series, and that was the first one. Mm-hmm. So there's that. What were the next 2?
The next one was Necessary Evil, which is about a treasure hunt on a New Hampshire farm. Okay. Then there was Michael Lawrence, and then the other one it's called Jenny Goodnight, and it's a Wild West mystery, which I wrote because I love John Wayne movies and the Maverick series and all that fun stuff. So I got to write a shoot 'em up. It was great.
Nice. Very nice. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so those are your books. That's when you started. Why did you pick self-publishing?
Oh, so there was a woman in our town who had won the Reader's Favorite Award, I think back in 2013. So she had done really, really well kind of towards the beginning of the current self-publishing era, right when Amazon started. And she held this class and on how to self-publish. And at the time I wasn't really interested in self-publishing because I kind of had this idea that it meant your book wasn't good, and it meant that the physical copies weren't going to be nice. But when I read her book and looked at, and I held her book, because to me, reading's very tactile. It's important to have like and not just a nice cover, but like a nice, the pages have to be laid out nice. It has to feel good in your hand. Yeah, when I felt her book and I saw the quality of what was coming out, I was like, okay. And by that point, I had been submitting, to agents and publishers for years, and I'd gotten some really good feedback, but I kind of knew I wasn't in a genre that would be easy to pick up. Like I don't really write fantasy. I don't really write romances. So I knew that like my chances of getting into the published field were pretty narrow. And this was a way to kind of test the books and see if anyone other than me liked them. and it was a product I could be proud of. So the reason why I went into it was to kind of test it to see if anyone would like it. And also because it was like, well, let's just try it and see what happens.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually a really interesting story as to why you picked it, because like for me it was one of those, by the time I was done writing it, I was just like, I'm not bothering with reaching out. I didn't realize you would actually like fielded
Yeah.
stuff out there and stuff. That's pretty cool and ambitious. Honestly, when I finished my first book, I don't know if I would have been adult enough to like take the criticism if I got when I got back.
It can be brutal. It can be brutal. And like I still send out, test chapters every once in a while just to kind of see, and I still get feedback, which is really nice. But again, I don't want to say I'm lazy, but after a while, you're just kind of like, you know what? I've had enough rejection.
Yeah, no, because so I started looking at the publishing world later in the like after my first book, I want to say, and just the little that I learned about it wasn't particularly inspiring, where it was like, even if a publishing house picks up your stuff, unless you're what they decide on that year, like you're not getting money for advertising or anything. Like it's still all on you. So at that point it was like, well, why not? Everybody buys through Amazon anyway, and I'm getting more of the royalty that way, and I don't have to front all this cash. So
and the really nice thing is too, like with self-publishing, is I'm on my own schedule. So if life gets too busy, I don't have to hit a deadline, except one that I've set myself, which is nice, because life does get busy. And I really like writing. I didn't want it to be like a job. I wanted it to, I do want it to be my job. I want to be Jessica Fletcher and do nothing but write books and solve mysteries and be fabulous. But at the same time, I didn't want it to become a grind. And
you didn't want to lose the love for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm still working towards Jessica Fletcher mode.
Well, it seems like you're doing pretty well.
Oh, thanks.
I want to circle back just to something you said about like the quality, because that was definitely for me one of the struggles I ran into. Was so I had gone through graphic design, and I said, I'm not going to pay someone an exorbitant amount of money. So I started listening to free courses, found this guy who was very, very helpful with self-publishing. His name's Derek Murphy. If again, for somebody listening, if they were interested, you could look him up. He has a lot of good content. A lot of it's free. And so he had a cover design like class that you could watch. So I watched that, and then I hammered something out, and I said, you know what? I like this. It looks good. And I had submitted it to his Facebook group, and other people gave feedback, and that I could handle, that it was one of those, okay, pick and choose. And it came out better for it. But the thing that I forgot about was the back of the cover, because once people look at the front, it's like you turn it over and they read the book blurb, and I'm terrible at writing book blurbs.
Oh, they're so hard.
Even just designing the back of the cover, it's like you start picking up other books, and they all look different, but they all look right. And so I kind of standardized the way that I do it now, but it was like the third iteration of print for me that I got around to like, yeah, you should really make this look better, like the entire thing, not just focusing, on page layout and cover. So no, the back
cover, the back cover copy is the hardest thing to write, I find, because it's just like, because you know what it's like. You've written this book, you poured your heart and soul into it, all the nuances, and you have to strip all the nuances out and just write like 2 paragraphs about why this book is awesome, which goes against, I have some natural modesty, and part of me is just like, well, you can't brag, but you have to.
You should read this.
You should read this, but only if you want to. I don't know what, I lost my camera for a second, but I don't know if you can still hear me.
I can still hear you.
Okay.
Well,
there we go. I'm turning it back on now. Oh, there we go. Yay.
So yeah, the next question, which you talked a little bit about, is just how do you handle writer's block?
Oh, I get depressed. That's the first thing that I do.
Get depressed, start drinking. Eventually it comes back.
I eat too much chocolate. I complain to my friends until they're sick of me. It's really bad. But seriously, what I tend to do is, I'm not one of those people that say you have to write every day to be a writer, because I do think you need breaks, and I think you have to live life in order to be a better writer. But that said, if I can't put a story on page, I'm pretty miserable. So what I try to do is, like I said, is I try to come up with some other creative outlet that I can do something in the meantime until, like, you know how it is. Like sometimes you just get stressed and you can't think creatively for whatever reason, like the world's blowing up or COVID happened or something. So it's finding some other outlet, which to me can be a variety of things. Actually, acting is one of them. So I do acting classes and local stuff. That's one way of me just handling writer's block, just kind of get the juices flowing in some other way. And last year, what really helped me was writing short scripts, because just the act of putting words on paper, I found that even if it wasn't like, I like writing scripts, but to me, books are where it's at. So writing scripts, but even just doing that was so helpful, because it made me feel like, oh yeah, I do know what I'm doing. I do like this. I can put together a coherent sentence. Yay me. So yeah, just trying to find some other way to channel your creativity and take the pressure off of yourself, I find, is the best way to handle it. I don't know if that's a good answer, but
No, I liked it. I like it. Yeah, what you were saying about you made a comment about life, like living your life to be a better writer type thing.
Mhm.
And that was something that, because when you're a kid, you have a lot of ideas. And then as you get older, some of them naturally fall away, and you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't as good as I thought it was of an idea. But something that's interesting about books is, like, if you try to hammer them out, if you tell yourself, it's like, I'm going to do this in a year, there's a give take to that. One is that you finish your book. But the flip side of that is that if you hadn't finished your book in a year, maybe there's something a year and a half from now in your life that could have radically made that book better. An experience with someone that you meet, a character, a something that radically would have changed the book. And unfortunately, you get to pick one or the other, because obviously at some point the book needs to be done. But the flip side of that is just I've watched a few of my stories just change so drastically, and they've gotten better. And part of that's just getting older and having more exposure, traveling, seeing other places, other cultures, meeting new people. And yeah, so no, I thought that was a really good, like you said, like get out of yourself, get out of your headspace, go do something else creative.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because I was actually working on a book in 23. It was one of those things where I was like, I'm tired of not writing. I'm going to force myself to write this book. And I made really good progress on it. Like I did, I think 40,000 words, something like that weren't outlined.
Yeah.
But there was something wrong with it. There was just something tonally wrong. Like it flowed, but it was not. So I took a month off. And when I came back to it, I realized that I was dealing with some pretty heavy stuff in my life at the time. And I was reading a lot of books that were darker, and it was affecting how I was writing. And when I read what I'd forced myself to write, I realized that I didn't believe there was a theme throughout the book, like a point of view about life that I actually personally don't believe in. And it was throughout this whole book, just because I was in kind of like in a bad headspace. And I thought, that's not me. It's hurting the book. It's not what I believe in. It's not working. So I had to scrap almost the entire book. And it's still going to get written, but it's like, I had to take a break from it, because like the core of the story is really good, but what I was trying to do was not. So yes, taking time, and it's really an act of faith to step back, because I don't know if you feel this way, but I always feel like if I don't write this now, I'll never write it again. I'll lose it.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's not necessarily true.
No, I definitely have pieces of that it's just like, if you don't finish this, you might never finish it. Like you have to. So
yeah, but sometimes stepping back, because I would not have been proud of that book if I kept going like that. So it was better not to go forward with it. Now I've got this short story that I actually am proud of. So I'm like, great, I can publish this.
So spinning off of what you were saying, and I know it's later on the question list, but what kind of writer are you? Do you tend to block everything out in the beginning, or are you more of a seat of your pants type writer, or a little bit of both? How does that?
A little bit of both. I tend to write a pretty extensive outline. Largely, I think because a lot of them they're somewhat mysteries. Like they may not be a classic Agatha Christie, but they're, there's a mystery that someone's trying to solve in it. So that requires laying clues down in a certain pattern.
Yeah.
That hopefully people don't pick up on right away. But there's always a point in the story where my outline doesn't work, where you get to a point where you're like, wait, they wouldn't be doing that though. And so you have to throw out at least a piece of the outline, or there's a character who you thought was just going to be like a one-off and you end up really liking them. So they come in and they're in for the rest of the book. So it's sort of like I do lay out, like I always know where the book is going to end, but sometimes the getting there is a little bit more of a wibble wobble than the outline would suggest.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, that sounds similar to how I write. I've heard of people that just like, yeah, I just start writing, man. I start at the beginning, write straight through till the end, and just whatever happens, I just listen to the characters, and it's like
that's more faith than I've got.
Yeah, like, absolutely not. That's insane.
I know.
I need to
do
have
that.
some clue.
I know. I have a lot of admiration for people who can do that. I am definitely not that person.
Yeah. No, well,
I've tried it.
Again, I hadn't really, for you, that's kind of a loaded question because, yeah, if you're writing mystery, I can see how you would really want to have a very good idea of where that's going before you start that. That makes total sense.
Especially who the murderer is, because it colors everything. I look at it like it's like an illness, and there's symptoms are going to be scattered throughout the whole thing. So it's like, it's not just where the clues are, but it's how the innocent people would react to the questions and how the guilty person reacts to the questions. And like, it's like, it affects everything. So you have to at least know who murdered the person and why.
Yeah. No,
then everything else can follow.
Have you ever seen a show that like, shows are a little bit different because they go, I think the problem is that they drag it out for too long. But like the early 2000s was so guilty with this, where they would throw this big overarching plot and they wouldn't know if the series was getting renewed. So they would like tease it through season 1, then season 2, then and by the time they got to like season 7 or 8, they'd be like, oh, we should probably like reveal who the murderer is. And it was always so underwhelming because it dragged so long. And I feel like, yeah, for you to not know why and to just write and then like, oh, we'll just find out who the murderer is. It's like, no, that people will notice. Like,
yeah, I think so. I mean, you could do a good rewrite, but I'd rather get it done.
Yeah.
The nuances are so important, especially in mystery, And you don't want the guy twirling his mustache and going, ha ha.
Turns out it's not that guy. Wait, what?
No, wait.
So what's your favorite book that you've written and why?
Oh, that's always hard. But I think my two favorites are probably Summer Shadows, because it was my first one. And it's just I don't want to say it's like a sweet book, because it's not. There's a lot of heavy themes in it, but it's just it kind of like when I wrote it. I was working in a church, and I was kind of writing it off of all the people that I was meeting in the church. So it has a lot of like my friends in it, if you will.
A little nostalgic.
Yeah. So to me, it's like, it's a very cozy book, with a lot of things that I really like in it. And the soundtrack that I use for it is fantastic. And then my other favorite is definitely Jenny Goodnight, because I grew up reading a lot of Louis L'Amour and some Zane Grey, and a lot of like Westerns were really just kind of like something that we did in my family. Like we watched a ton of them. So it was nice to be able to like blend the two things that I really, really loved as a kid, which were mysteries like Sherlock Holmes and putting it out west and trying to figure out why, like in a town where people regularly go out and like shoot each other, what would make it a murder?
That's a good question.
So that was the starting point for me with this, was like, what would make it a murder? Like, and it would have to be someone getting shot in the back, because that's not cool. You don't do that out west.
No, they weren't dueling. It wasn't. Yeah.
Right.
So just something that just came to me. Do you reread your books like once you've published it?
I reread parts.
Okay.
But I don't usually, because I try to get better with every book. Like, you
Yeah.
try to get, and I'm afraid that if I reread the whole thing, sometimes I'll be like discouraged. So, but luckily the parts I read hold up pretty well. So
Yeah. No, I was at my in-laws and they had a copy of Man and Monster. I mean, they have a copy of all of them, but they had a
that
copy
was
of
really
Man and
good.
Monster. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I pulled it off the shelf and I was thumbing through it, and my sister-in-law kind of made fun of me. And it's like, I haven't looked at this in 10 years. Like, I don't even, I'm like looking at the pages like I wrote that. Okay, sure, whatever. Like, so,
Yeah.
no,
Because sometimes it's just the one sentence where you're like, ooh,
yep.
I could have rewritten that so much more concisely.
The other thing that kills me is I always start second guessing the grammar because I'm terrible with grammar. So if I start like reading the book, I'm like, wait, I did that wrong. I need to go update the menu. Nope, just leave it alone. It just, if somebody else comes to me and says, hey, there's a grammar error, I'll go pull the file up and like re-upload it to Amazon and try to fix it.
Oh yeah.
But for me to look at the book, no, terrible.
Yeah. Because I start rewriting the whole thing and I'm like, oh no, this is not good.
No, this is done. We're moving on.
Yeah. It's funny because when Summer Shadows came out, there were a few grammatical errors in it. And I remember talking to my editor and I said, oh yeah, some people like let me know that there was some, and she was so embarrassed. And I said, look, there's like 100,000 words in here. We're going to miss 3. I'm okay with that.
Well, and that's,
I still like the book.
That's something that what you were talking about with quality for independent publishing. First of all, to anybody listening, which is probably just going to be other indie authors who already know this, but like you can re-upload the manuscript
right away.
So if you're reading your friend's book, highlight the errors and give it to them. Because
let them know. They can fix it. Yeah.
And when Man and Monster first launched, my dad got his physical copy of it. And the way that you know that it's a first edition, because I didn't bother like writing editions other than changes to the cover or back, is in one of the stories. There's 2 stories. One is about the wizard and one is about the werewolf. And the names of the main characters in those stories are David and Daniel. And there was one miss where in Daniel's story, someone calls him David. And my dad like calls me. He goes, dude, page 145, you say David. And I like opened mine. We both got it in the mail. And I was just like, and I knew like, 12 orders had gone out or something. I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. And went, updated it. It's
someday
fine.
When we're super famous, that's going to be like the one
I know,
that
that's
the
what
collectors are looking for.
Check page 145.
It's a first edition.
So.
But yeah, I think that's something that people should, especially people considering indie publishing. It's published as you go. You don't need to buy like 5,000 copies, which, at once you could buy 5. And then when you find that, you just upload a new copy like that afternoon and it's fixed. And it goes out to all the Kindles and it fixes in the Kindles. So it's like, errors are not such a huge deal. Fix them, but it's not a huge deal.
And actually, I think my best friend texted me too. There was something on the back cover that was wrong. I don't remember, but it was one of those. I'm not trying to be that guy, but and he sends me a picture with it highlighted, and it's like, no, be that guy, like, please. So.
Yeah, I need all the eyes I can get.
So in the whole Amazon vein, how are you doing with reviews, and have you gotten negative reviews? How do you handle the criticism? Where's all that at?
So I'm doing pretty good with the reviews. Since the advent of AI, sales and reviews have gone down like dramatically. But what I got beforehand was generally pretty positive. And when I did get a negative, I tried to sort it between, like, is this an opinion?
Yep.
Like, for instance, they just don't like books about orphan children.
Why are you reading this? But okay.
Yeah, don't read this if you don't like orphan children. Or is it like an actual criticism that like I should have, like I should take note of? So one woman in England commented on my book that the children just seemed too sweet in my book. So I went back and I reread like the interactions with the kids, and they did act like brats at certain points. So I'm like, you know what? That's probably not.
You didn't just tell her that American children are very
American
sweet.
Children are nicer.
Are terrible.
But I'm also very careful about who I give. I find for me the crisis point is when the book is new, when it's like not published yet. So I have some friends who are very, very dear friends, but it's best not to give them a book that's not finished, because they are, I don't want to say detailed oriented like it's bad, but sometimes it's like you miss the point.
Yeah.
And you mean well, and I can't handle it at that point. So I tend to send like the first draft. I tend to write my books with a particular person in mind. So like my sister's a good example, my sister Peggy. So I'll write a book, and when I'm stuck on something, I'll be like, okay, so if I write it this way, but I could write this way and she'll like it better. Like, and like that kind of helps me make a decision. So I'll send it to her. And if she likes it, or if she says, hey, I liked it, but this scene didn't really struck me off, like she's the person that I'm writing the book towards. So I'll fix it with that audience member in mind.
Interesting. That seems like a good system though. That's
right. Because there's just too many different styles. Like some people really like I write mysteries, but they're not like the Maltese Falcon where everyone's like evil, and the whole world's like cold and dark. Like there's a place for that, but that's just not mine. People are nice in mine, and they're goofy, and they have puppies just randomly. It's not. It's a little bit more Hallmark than that.
More like a Goonies adventure type thing.
It's like someone gave me the greatest compliment and said one of the encounter books was like if Steven Spielberg had done Jurassic Park with aliens, but for kids. And I'm like, that was it. That was what I was looking for. So it's like I find when you're dealing with criticisms, first check if they're your audience. If they're not your audience, then it really, unless it's like a thing like actually the sun rises in the east, where it doesn't really matter that much. So you're writing towards a particular set of people, and if they like it, you're fine. That's how I.
No, that's a good way to. Something that I've and it dealt with, and it's more when you have those early stages when friends and family are reading it, and you're like, hey, I'm gonna pull the trigger and submit this. What do you guys think? And they're like, I just don't like it. And you're like, okay, well, what about it do you not like? Well, just I don't know. It just kind of, and it's like, no, you need to tell. Like, if you just don't like it, then it's just not your book. Like, is there something? Because my dad's kind of notorious for that, of like just telling me how he feels about it. But it's like, okay, but what would you change? I don't know. So no.
I make them give it to me in writing.
But,
I make them give me critique in writing. Like if you're going to critique it, I need it in writing so that if you said something that I'm upset about, I'm not like facing you when I read it.
Yeah, that too. Well, because you can go back and you can think about it when it's written down. Yeah. Like you said, it's not a face-to-face.
Yeah, and it kind of forces them to say, usually when they write the critique, it's a little bit easier for them to say, I didn't like it because, you know, but when they're looking at you, I think sometimes they have a hard time looking at your face and going like, oh, I just kicked you. I'm sorry.
They don't see you cry if it's written.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my father on the first book, like he doesn't like dogs particularly. So he would have said, hey, why did you have the puppies in there? I'm like, because I wanted puppies. I'm sorry. And they're staying. They're not leaving. So
yeah. Oh no, I've had a few like that too.
Yeah.
My next question is one of my favorite questions, and a little bit of like me just trying to figure it out. And you started with the whole like since the rise of AI, what are your best book marketing strategies? Because everybody in the indie world is just like, we all believe that there's an audience out there for us, and there probably is, but God help you to find them and connect with them these days. And
I know. Well, I found for me that actually going to like local fairs was a really great way to connect with people. Like I only sell maybe 10 or 15 books at a time, but usually when you have a face-to-face interaction with somebody, they become, if they like you, they end up becoming more of a fan, and they end up telling their friends, and you end up, it's slower, but the organic is longer. Like it's a longer lasting relationship.
Yeah.
So for me, I've always found like in person, making sure that physical copies of my books. And again, I think my genre fits that better. With romances, you tend to read them quickly, and you know, there's tropes that you look for. So I think that's better online, but with my books, it's better. I think the physical copies work better. As for online strategies, I had one for a while. It's not working since AI. So it's been a work in progress. I do find that like creating little book trailers and putting them on Instagram or any place where you are naturally. Some people try to get me onto TikTok. I can't get into.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, okay. But Instagram and Facebook I use all the time. So I use a lot of that, and that does help. Kindlepreneur puts out a great set of videos, and they have a great app for learning how to use Amazon ads and how to like market your book better on Amazon. That has helped a lot. You know, so I highly recommend going on to Kindlepreneur, and he has a lot of free stuff that's actually really stays really up to date.
Yeah. I hadn't done, I think I ran like one Amazon ad. I did Facebook ads, but again, this was like 2 years ago, and I almost came to breaking even.
Yeah.
And then I tried it after, I think it was this year. I hadn't even released anything new. I was just like, I want to focus on the marketing as opposed to the writing. And they updated whatever it was because it did nothing for me this time.
Yeah, it changes really fast. It's like a full-time job marketing your books. So for me personally, I've had to like kind of step, because last year I tried to do a lot of marketing too, and it was kind of like it did okay, but it's not my strong suit. So this year I'm focusing more on writing and going back to those in-person interactions, because I just, like I said, it's as a writer, as a reader, I don't tend to follow book talk or any of those. I tend to go into a bookstore and say, oh, that looks interesting. Or I talk to my friends and they're like, this is a great book, which again is very frustrating because you can't really control that very much, but it does seem to work for me for that genre. So
nice. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'll have to try that more because like I said, the online stuff hasn't hasn't really worked either.
It's a very rapidly shifting. I mean, I think if you have fun with it, because a lot of the people who I know who do well, they have fun with trying to figure out the algorithms. I don't. I just get stressed.
No. Here's a puzzle. When you're done solving it, solve the next one.
Yeah, it's like great. Look, I'm
chaos,
trying to figure out who murdered the Marchesa in the family room. I don't have time for this.
No, I think a lot of other indie authors feel that way as well. Of like, I want to write. I don't want to, because like you said, it becomes a full-time marketing job.
Yeah.
And that's just not what a lot of people want to do. So.
Yeah, I find that the best marketing tool I have is my covers. So if you have a really solid cover and a really good one line to describe your book, that goes a very, very long way, both in person and on, in the virtual world. So
who's your cover designer?
It's called, I don't know if you can pronounce it, but like MIBL art. And I found them because another friend of mine had used them to upgrade his covers, and I really liked what he did with his. So I know I originally designed the covers for the Encounter series, but they weren't doing that great. So I had them redesign it. I don't know if you can see it, but I told them about Tale Half Told is set in the 70s, and there was a particular car that I told them about, and they put that car on the cover, and I'm like, okay, you're now my favorite. I'm going to use you for everything. And it really made a difference. They do a very nice job with their work.
Okay.
So
is that like on Fiverr or something, or?
No, I can send you a link to them if you'd like to put it in the show notes.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. I'm not a graphic designer, so I can do pretty good covers, but this was like a level up from what I could do. So I have my 2-year in graphic design, and honestly, the covers, I have a nagging suspicion because they are just so important with books that it's, I focused more on an audiobook at the moment because I paid someone to do Man and Monster as an audiobook, and then I upgraded to a hardcover with Amazon. And someday I'll fight with the covers again. After that, I was like, I need some time. Yeah. Yeah, I actually just put the Encounter series on audiobooks too. And that was a fun process to try to figure out how to do that. But
Nice.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, the audiobook process is definitely very different. And it's funny because like some of my friends are like, "Oh, why didn't you just do it?" It's like, I tried, and then I saw what went into it. And then once we had a baby, it was like, okay, yeah, no. But like trying to find quiet in an apartment and stuff, it was like, yeah, no, just pay someone, get it done. So
yeah. The person Henry Healy did the recorded, the Encounter series for me, and I want to get Jenny Goodnight out, but it's a first person and it's a female, so I'm like, okay, I can't have Henry.
I would nail that, him and his very deep voice. Yeah, no, that'd be awesome.
Definitely have a different flavor, especially in the romance scenes.
Wow. Ken's a great guy. And
yeah,
he
he's
has
awesome.
an epic voice, and I can see why that's not gonna work.
No. But I did try to record. I recorded the first chapter, and it's a lot of work. I respect the people who do this because, sound design is a whole other beast.
Oh, it is. It is. So what you mentioned when you were younger, reading a lot of Westerns and stuff. What do you like to read now? What are you reading now?
So right now I'm kind of in the middle of a couple of books. I am reading it's called The Wide Wide Sea by Hampton Sides, and it's about Captain Cook's last voyage in the Pacific. And that's really good. I love reading history a lot. And I think that's probably why a lot of my books have something of a historical background to them. I also love thrillers. I love like Simone St. James. She does spooky, like ghost mysteries. She's a Canadian writer. Very, very good if you want to check her out. I loved your book.
Oh, thanks.
I read a lot. I try to read a lot of different things. And I try to read a lot of classics too. Last year I was focused a lot on like modern day thrillers. This year I'm trying to kind of put a few more classical stories under my belt. Right now I'm reading some Japanese medieval plays and stuff, which has been really interesting. Just kind of different take on some familiar myths. So that's been fun.
Do you find with the Japanese stuff, do you find that it's like paced differently?
Yes. It's much more like, you could tell that poetry is really their thing. Because it's like there's a beat almost to how they write things, and it's very quick, but it's very beautiful. Like the way, even in English, I find it's very beautiful to read.
Yeah, I haven't read a lot, and now it's gonna like the conversation's gonna nerd a little bit, but I'd always kind of dodged anime. I was never particularly into it, but a good friend of mine like twisted my arm to watch some from, I think it was the 70s or 80s, and like some of the redos that they did in the early 2000s for whatnot, and they were good. They were very fun, but it was something that I noticed. It was like the pacing of this is very, like, it works, but it's just very different than the way American film is done. So I was wondering if they're books, but I think that I have a suspicion that you're correct there with poetry. That seems like a very good way to articulate why the pacing is different. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I was also reading the Iliad, and just because that's poetry too, but it's so much bigger than like Japanese poetry. It's like very, very short, very to the point, and it leaves a lot to the imagination. Like they just give you some beautiful images and let you do something with it. But Homer's like, nope, here's the epic speech. Here's what you're going to think about. You're going to hear the jingle of the chainmail and stuff, which I love. Like, I love it.
The Iliad, I read most of it, or I'm going to go with pieces, conservatively say pieces of it. But no, it was very good. I picked up a copy that.
It's good. I preferred the Odyssey when I was a teenager and I was reading it, because like, what?
I said you're one of them.
I'm sorry.
No, well, actually,
there's a whole bunch of in the Iliad, which I did like, I liked it a lot, but there was so much of like, and then he stabbed him in the kidney. It's like, can we stop with the stabbing in the kidney? You know, we got it. More is brutal.
There is a lot of that. No, I think I liked the Iliad more. I was familiar with the Odyssey from just like shows being a kid.
Yeah.
And then it was the Aeneid that I just couldn't stand because it's a blatant ripoff of both of them. So it's better if you like the Odyssey, that's fine.
That's right. I just read Plato's Republic and I made my brother laugh because I said, look, I was so disappointed. I read the Republic. I thought it was going to be like this deep, awesome thing. And it turns out every 70s sci-fi show about like, you know, dystopian future ripped off. It was so boring.
Laid the groundwork.
Yeah, it was like, oh, that's it.
That's funny.
All right.
Staying away from
you're
my
probably
Greek
the only
philosophy.
person.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people on writing or self-publishing?
Yes. Well, first, my first thing is always write what you love. Don't. A lot of people say write to market, and I guess if you want to make money, do that. But
Yeah.
you're gonna be spending more time with your book than you will on your job. So make sure it's something that you really, really love and that you're really interested in, because you get into it really deep and you might as well enjoy it while you're there. And if you enjoy it, your readers will enjoy it because your joy or your enjoyment will come out through it. So I wouldn't worry. When I write, I don't worry about the market. I just worry about the story. And then afterwards, I worry about the market.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Continue if there's any other advice, and then we can circle back to that.
Oh yeah. And then I guess for self-publishing, it's I find it a lot of fun. The practical side of it, the formatting, the picking the cover, the back cover copy is always a beast, but it just try to have fun with it, I think, and until someone's paying you.
Yeah.
You know, like good money, you should not be stressed about this. You should just be enjoying it.
The whole writing to market thing, I started listening to just a few people on YouTube, like, oh, you know, what are these people doing that they're successful selling their books because they're independently published. And so at least one of them that I distinctly remember, but I believe there were enough that were just like, oh, just go on Amazon and search for like different genres and see what doesn't have a lot, and then thumb through that and then figure out a story that meets that criteria and then promote yourself. And it's like, so you're writing stuff you hate, but you're writing to market. Like, that's not,
no.
You know, that's a business strategy. That's not being a writer, like, for the love of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, you might as well be, I don't know, you might as well, I do accounting to support them.
Yeah. No,
so like, you might as well just do that. I mean, it's not fun trying to write. I don't find it that much fun. I mean, I'm writing a book right now that is all about whaling, you know, like in the 1840s. And some of it is just like, it's just little details that you have to figure out, which if you don't like it, it's soul crushing. You know,
Yeah.
It's like, you know,
Yeah.
I have to figure out what kind of hooks they use, you know, in order to make this book. And I have to figure out how to navigate on the open water, which is a lot of math that I usually don't like, but I love it now because I'm doing this book. And so I can't imagine doing that, like, for something you don't love,
Yeah.
you know, like, so.
No, you made a very good point there of just like, why not just get a job doing something else, you know, like something that's going to give you a regular paycheck, because you could spend all this time on a book that you don't love and then it still might not sell. So
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And
No,
my father gave me some great advice early on, and two pieces of advice, which I'll pass on. One of them was he advised me to pick what my success was. So was it selling so many copies? Was it getting certain reviews? And he said, you could pick like a goal that you can choose as one. And that way it can be controllable, something that you can actually, you know, that doesn't rely on the whims of fate, if you will. And the other one was
measurable.
Right. And the other thing he said was, look, you can put all your best work into it. You can do everything right. You can figure out the algorithms. You can, do everything right. And just because the market's going to switch at the last minute, you could still technically fail. Like by which I mean, you don't have a bestseller or whatever it is. So just do your best work and let the results kind of take care of themselves,
Yeah.
and so put out a book that you're proud of, and don't worry about the rest, because you really can't do much about it anyway.
No, that's good advice. And even I remember, like, when I started writing Man and Monster, Once Upon a Time was really big, and it was like, oh, fairy tales are big, like I should finish this. And yeah, no, it didn't. It took me years later that I finished that book. And it's one of those things that, like, yeah, you missed the market, but also if I had published it that year, it would have been awful. Like,
Right.
It would have been a terrible book. It wasn't ready. So,
well, there was an article out the other day about how Book Talk made this book from the 90s a bestseller again. So it's like, just because it's not a big hit in the first year, it doesn't mean that someone's not going to find it, or, just kind of, I guess, just be kind of careful about what goal that you set for yourself. Yeah. We all want to be James Patterson, but that's just not going to happen for a lot of us.
But no, I mean, if you can get a small community together, small regular community, it's the difference between being a rock star and just playing regularly in a bar room where everybody loves you. It's like, how big do you need the audience,
I had one friend who writes fantasy, and she told me that someone wrote into her because they'd written some fan fiction about her book. And I was like,
awesome.
I'm like, that you've made it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I'm like, so, and for me, when I made it was when a stranger came up to me, like this is 2 or 3 years into it, and they told me, oh, I read your first book and it made me cry, but like in a good way. And I was like, I'm like, I can go home. I made it. So yeah. So sometimes success is not what you initially thought it was going to be.
I think, that's good advice, because I think that applies to a lot of life, that success isn't always what you're envisioning when you start.
Yeah.
So I know we're coming up on the end of our time here, but where can people find you? And also, I'm just telling you, I'm going to steal your picture and use that as the thumbnail.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
As well as backlinks to your website and all that stuff. But where can people find you?
So I am on, I have a website. It's www.killarneytraynor.com. Very easy to remember. And I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, even though there's not a lot on Blue Sky right now. And technically I'm on TikTok, but I don't do anything on there except watch cat videos. So,
No TikTok. What is Blue Sky? I haven't heard of that.
It's an alternative, like Facebook. It's interesting. I'm not sure if it's going to pick up, but I figured I'd try it. I'm also on Threads, which is actually, Threads is great for anyone who's writing. There's a lot of great indie writers on there who give off advice. So Threads is a great place to go if you're an indie writer.
Okay. No, I'll check that out too. I hadn't heard of either of those. So
yeah, I highly recommend it. And you get some nice scuttlebutt from like the fairs and the book cons. People go on there to talk about them, and sometimes it's very fun.
Cool. No, I'll definitely check it out. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was really good to see you again. Really good to catch up. And I'm terrible at starting these. I'm terrible at ending these. But no, I'm sure whenever your next book comes out, if you want to, like, I don't obviously have a following or anything, but if you want to do another interview for the 3 people that might watch, I'm happy to do it. Let me know.
Oh, you're gonna have an amazing group by then. Yeah. But yeah, I'd love to come back. This has been a lot of fun. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, and I'm happy to do it. Tell the family I say hi. All right.
I will. I'll give my best to tell them the baby.
Will do.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, Barney. Bye.